Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Oh, hello everyone. Oof, it's been a minute, hasn't it? Welcome to another year of Who Got the Assist. It's great to be back with you for another year of Fantasy Premier League. New jingle too. Hope you enjoyed it, courtesy of former co-host Nick and his AI expertise. But don't worry, his wife will keep up her appearances in the outro. I'm Tom, and yes, I'm here for another year, the 8th year of WGTA. And having given Euros Fantasy a studied wide berth, I'm totally recharged and ready to go for another season. And what's the season it's looking like being? And for those who've been listening for a while, it's a relief to say that I'm joined by my venerable co-host Sam, FPL Pricey. I managed to get one to stay on for another year. So here we are, mate, back podding again. Oh, it's been a little while, hasn't it? I mean, are you well? I heard you had some big news over the summer.
Yeah, very well, thank you. The big news, of course, is that Southampton got promoted. No, I'm kidding. I got engaged over the summer, so my lovely fiance is downstairs and will be putting up with me for another year of FPL content. Hopefully, that won't be a problem come the wedding. But I got engaged over the summer, so any future planning, if we want to remember the day, I won't have to worry about FPL. So it's very smart, really.
Yeah,
I'm also wearing. Pardon, what was that?
Just make sure the wedding's in the off season as well. Then we're all good.
Yeah, all tactical, or in an international break or something. Yeah, don't worry, it's all already covered. I'm also wearing my purple Fiorentina shirt. She got me as well on theme, I think, on brand for the WGTA colours. So yeah, really excited to get going. I can't believe how much I've missed FPL over the last couple of months. Of course, we had the Euros to enjoy. I did play a little bit of fantasy, but not in any way seriously, and I'm coming back feeling really refreshed and ready to go again.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I had an interesting summer. So I've made redundant a couple of months ago. So I've been kind of full-time dadding, actually, which has been a really interesting experience. Anyone wants some research and insight, manager / associate director, do let me know. I'm available. But no, full-time dadding. Enjoying gardening leave as well. It's quite a nice change of pace after having quite a frantic job. But hey, that's by the by. FPL's now back as well, which gives me something even more to focus on, which is very cool indeed. And yeah, new intro jingle, some really nice updated graphics from you, Sam. And it feels like it's a new season. And there's all the excitement today, wasn't there, with the relaunch? And I think we were kind of yesterday. We were thinking, all right, it's going to be tonight. And then the news dropped about the free transfers and the bonus changes, etc., which we will discuss later on. And it kind of started to look like it's going to be today. And then obviously with the Crystal Palace hastily changing what they wrote, I think kind of the cat was out of the bag. Then they had to go for it. And of course, the game was updating, and I was here and there, driving, running. I've taken up running recently because I'm sitting around getting fat, drinking and smoking. So I thought, better do something positive. Around 25 minutes today, Sam.
Nice, well done.
I feel very good about
we'll
that.
Keep track of that.
Yeah, quite a long way into the couch to 10k now, which is very good. I'm very much enjoying it. But yeah, I mean, here we are, and it's fantastic. And we'll discuss aims for this season much later in this pod. But last season we did all right, didn't we? Overall, I kind of sneaked into 100k on the last day, and you were just a tiny bit outside. But given how information's proliferated, how busy everything is now in FPL universe, I think that we're ready to have another crack at it this year, especially with the changes, I guess, creating real divergences in play style, which I think we'll talk about later, as I said, but will definitely be eked out here. So I'm a bit more aggressive, aren't I, in FPL? I think it's fair to say. You're not exactly the most cautious manager in the world. You're no Nick, but there is a bit more, a hint more caution, I'd say, infused into your game.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say out of the two of us, you're the more aggressive naturally, but I am easily persuaded, let's say. So there are moments in the season where I can be kind of wrangled into something more aggressive or more exciting, especially if the cards fall the way that sometimes I enjoy playing the more aggressive game in. This season will be a little bit different. Obviously, we'll have less double game weeks, or at least smaller double game weeks as well. So maybe there's more excuse. I think there are two ways of looking at this. Maybe there's the more cautious approach, which you can plan a little bit further ahead. Obviously, we'll go into the free transfer thing later on. But also, maybe you can be more aggressive with your moves because you're not necessarily booking moves in too far in advance for a bench boost or for a free hit necessarily. You're able to play things week by week a little bit more, especially if you're able to bank a couple of transfers. Obviously, we can now roll up to 5. And then you can play a little bit more aggressively even without using the chips as well. So interesting to see what play styles formulate this season in what is a fresh look FPL, not a complete change in what's going on and what we're all used to, but some interesting new system changes that we're going to have to get used to, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get into that in just a little bit. I do have one bit of housekeeping, which is that we've still got last year's winners' trophy for the mini league, which was called pending pending moderation when it first launched because of the arse in assist. So
Oh wow!
I'm glad it's gotten through the censors. But we're going to
think
basically
they'd have assist like on the OK list, wouldn't you?
I know, it's very strange. A few people got in touch with me saying that they also had like assist in their team name and they were also pending moderation, but all fine now. So we're going to kind of give it till the end of this week, basically until Sunday, for someone in the top 10 to claim it. At the highest finisher, obviously in the top 10 who does claim it will have it. We didn't hear from last year's winner, which is Timothy Miamba, which is good because I didn't have to send the trophy to Malawi. If you are listening, Timothy, and you do want your trophy, do get in touch with me. But if you did finish in top 10 last year, that is Jeremy Kalou, Alexander Fuing, Matthew Allen, Matt Heath, Loritz Poos, Erin Butler, Greg Hensman, Tony Ghosh, or Jack. I know you, Jack, and I will bring you the trophy next time I see you. So I'm not going to send it to you, but if you're any of the other 8, do get in touch. And the highest ranking person who did get in touch will get the trophy by Sunday. If no one gets in touch, then we'll have to go to top 50 next week. I'm determined to get rid of this, and my partner is very determined to get rid of it because it's just gathering space in the study. So please get in touch. Right, on with the show.
On with the show, indeed. And for the first time this season, I have the pleasure of saying we are who got the assist. On today's pod, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, blow off some of the rust and hopefully get back in the saddle in a positive way. We're going to obviously be talking about some of the pricing hot takes. We'll be doing a detailed A to Z next week, but for now, some initial thoughts really on what we're seeing. Of course, we've already briefly mentioned the game changes. We'll be going into that and our thoughts on the changes as well. Discussion on what our aims are for this year. Got a pod coming in a couple of weeks, which will lean into this a little bit more, but definitely worth starting the conversation there. And of course, we are going to look at first drafts. Now, it is very important to mention that these are first drafts. They are definitely not going to be what we end up on in a few weeks' time, but we thought it'd be really interesting this season to completely shield each other from looking at each other's first drafts. So this will be live on air the first time that either of us are seeing them. And I get the feeling that considering the different prices and the difficulty it is to build a really strong template this season, they're going to look quite interesting and quite different to one another. At least I've got that hunch anyway. In the meantime, though, we'll come on to that. But first off, it is Wednesday, the 17th of July. FPL opened 7-8 hours ago now, and we're already deep in the weeds in it. But for now, let's jump right into it.
Yes, let's start with the pricing. The next week's pod is going to be an in-depth look at it, the usual, I guess, kind of price tier by price tier, looking at the key assets and kind of our thoughts. And things are just, as Sam mentioned, everything's just open recently, and things are really just starting to kick off. It's starting to get to grips with the pricing structure, what all the players are currently priced at. And we were just saying before we came on there, we will make a few mistakes with the pricing, and we will kind of maybe use last year's price, something like that. We both have the structure open in front of us, but we may kind of just slip every now and again. Just forgive us that. I mean, it has been quite a few months since we last podded, so we are a bit rusty. We're going to depth for next week, but we do have kind of a few thoughts, I guess, to just contribute right now. Obviously, the headlines were that Haaland was the most expensive FPL asset ever. Palmer had the highest jump of any player between seasons, and the likes of Salah stayed premium as well. I think he stayed at the exact same price, didn't he? And I think it's I think it's broadly a very good structure. Actually, last year I think we kind of had to take a minute just to look into it. And I remember doing a box and whisker chart with the help of my friend Mitchell Sterling, just to look at how would the pricing end up how it had. Because when you were making your first draft last year, it was kind of you're thinking, oh well, I can literally cover every single base here and maybe even still have money to spare. Whereas this year, I suppose, Sam, when I've been doing a bit of drafting here and there, I've noticed it's very hard to make a team which covers all the bases. Really difficult. And I think that's absolutely great because there's going to be an infusion of choice this year. And obviously, a template of some kind will form prior to game week 1, which perhaps is the one that we'll both end up going with, give or take. However, I do think that sort of overall landscape where you've got like Palmer, Saka, Son, they're all difficult to fit into the same team. In fact, impossible to fit in the same team. You've got a real choice a choice where Haaland is situated. The whole thing, I think, looks very promising for the year ahead. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, super encouraged as well. I think it was almost inevitable that there were going to be more problems this season, even at the back end of last year. I think if you ask any FPL manager, you would have probably got the answer that Saka, Palmer, Foden, Watkins, Isak as well are all going to be more expensive, or at least holding up their end at around 8 to 9 million as well. And when you combine that with the possible surprise that Haaland's been bumped to 15 million, that's given us some really juicy decisions to make. And it means that everyone's going to have to make a sacrifice, whether or not that's Haaland, whether that's potentially Salah, who has actually remained at 12.5, or whether that's kind of taking a bit of a sacrifice on some of the new semi-premiums of Palmer, Saka, Son, as well as in that category. Maybe you just go without a couple of them. It is going to be really interesting to see what people do. The fact that we've got more transfers as well will probably change the play style when it comes to those price points. Maybe we're less locked into them. But what will be important, at least in the first couple of game weeks, is getting the price brackets correct and making sure that you're kind of covered if X player goes off and you need to get across to them quickly. Because as we know, the template can move pretty fast in the first couple of game weeks. The managers are at their most engaged at that point. Transfers are flying around like crazy and slow down after about 8 or 9 game weeks. But for those first couple of game weeks, prices are going to change very quickly. I like to kind of bide my time on moves and wait until the last minute. I might need to be a little bit more aggressive in the opening weeks. And that is one lesson that possibly I need to take into the season, which I didn't account for last year.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been the case. I mean, you've always got the usual dictum of just making sure all the price points are covered, and that kind of just, as you say, sort of helps just ameliorate your situation. If you do find you're down a bit of a blind alley, do that, or you leave 0.5 million in the bank, which this year is probably going to be a bit harder than it has been in years gone by.
For sure.
Especially if, as you say, we kind of hear that, or see as the template develops that Haaland and Salah are in most teams, which I wouldn't be surprised by, to be honest with you. And I don't know, overall I'm pretty happy with it. There's a few kind of little bits and pieces which I think are obviously worth noting. The first one obviously was Nkunku at 6.5 million and a midfielder. I'm really puzzled by what's gone on there. I don't really understand how that's possibly happened, to be honest with you. I mean, the guy's, I guess, attacking midfield sometimes, but they've mostly made his name, I guess, as a striker. Very good underlying data in the past. So potentially a bit of... I don't know, a bit of money to be saved there, especially if he does sort of emerge as kind of being a bit of a cut price Palmer. I like the fact that Marcus Rashford's is down to 7 again. Like there's a real sort of boom bust cycle with Rashford, isn't there? I mean, talking about a player who couple of seasons ago under the same management team, near enough. I mean, I know Van der Gag has gone, but and Benny McCarthy as well, I believe. But Van Nistelrooy and Hake, not a fish, a Dutch coach has come in. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that this year he bounces back and makes a mockery of that 7 million price tag. So a couple of players there that kind of came to mind. The other one was that was a bit of a niche one, which we'll talk about next week. So Morgan Rogers at 5.
People are going to talk about him.
Yeah, I thought that he was quite nicely priced, just because he seemed to really kind of nail in that slot towards the end of the season on the flank. So I thought him at 5 million was pretty interesting. And there were loads of 4.5 million defenders, which we'll talk about in just a bit, as to potentially why that is. But yeah, loads of them, absolutely loads of them. And that really surprised me, because even players like Lisandro Martinez or Ezri Konsa, you'd be expecting them to be kind of at 5. And then on the other side, you had players like kind of Tarkovsky sat at 5, which kind of, I don't know, it kind of that kind of didn't really make sense to me. But every year, you got to know that they're just gaming it a little bit, to be honest. I think we found out last year from actually trying to do a proper analysis. So does performance actually lead to price changes? Most of the time, obviously it does. And we've seen that with like Palmer, et cetera. But sometimes there are, around the edges at least, a bit of an element of gaming, I suppose, around how the price has been set up. I mean, does anything stick out to you other than those guys?
Yeah, I was going to mention the 4.5 defenders as well. We'll go into the bonus point thing later on, but the 4.5s from teams that don't necessarily score a lot of goals, but might keep the odd clean sheet. We're looking at Everton, Crystal Palace, those kind of Brighton as well might just about fall into that category, although they do score a few more goals. Those 4.5 defenders could be really, really good value for money this season. And I think if I was to apply some logic to it, I would say that because we've seen an increase in quite a lot of popular picks in the midfield and up front, they needed to probably bring the price down somewhere to make those picks accessible with a big premium draft. So let's say you want the Haaland and Salah draft. Well, that's almost impossible if the likes of Mikalenko, Dunk, Konza, Martinez, all of these players are also all 5 million as well. Those extra 0.5s probably just about make it impossible or near enough impossible. Just dangling that little carrot saying, okay, well, you can still have some decent enough defenders and try and get those 2 premiums in, makes it just tantalizing enough that some people might go there. And I think, like you say, there's a bit of game theory going on there as well, but there's enough there, and I think it makes it really interesting. The other player that I'd like to mention as well is Trent Alexander-Arnold at the back, down to 7 million. Really interested to see where he plays in this new system as well, because there are suggestions that he could end up in midfield, of course, but also what impact the new bonus point system might have on a player like him. The more attacking defenders creating more chances. If Liverpool concede, it's very unlikely that a player like Van Dijk now is going to be in line for bonus unless he has some sort of monster game. Whereas Trent probably just about sticks in there because of his chances created and the fact that he might have got an assist or a goal out of it as well. So at 7 million, he had a bit of an off season. A lot of people will ignore him, but I think he's a player that I've certainly got my eye on, and they've got a great run of fixtures to start with as well.
They do. I think it is difficult to fit him in alongside all of the other sort of coverage picks, premium picks, however you want to put it in the attack at the moment. So for me, my current thinking on that is watch and wait, especially because we don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, obviously we've got the friendly info coming up and things like that, which may give us a bit of intel. However, I think that everyone kind of involved in the Euros until quite late, including sadly England, happily we got to the final, but sadly we didn't win it. Those players don't come back until quite late, and we'll have like a different sort of preseason to the rest of the team. So notice that tonight, for example, you've got Spurs in action, you've got a couple other teams in action. I've just seen that Bernardo has scored twice tonight, according to Marcus in the chat. So there are kind of quite a few teams which are already sort of in preseason mode. So it will take a while for these players to come in, and we'll kind of, I guess, have to kind of make it up as we go along a little bit in terms of players like that, how they're going to fit in, because the change of boss is pretty huge for a lot of things. And we may even see that, maybe we'll end up moving away from Salah and think, hey, you know what, Luis Diaz seems to be one who's properly fancied in pre-season, or maybe Diogo Jota, who mystifyingly is back as a midfielder, could be the one who has been sort of favoured by Slot. We simply don't know yet. But yeah, lots of very interesting little stories, I think, in the pricing, and I guess kind of lots to unpick a bit more next week once we've got had a chance to get our heads around it, because I mean you'll see our drafts later on, but we haven't really had that much time with it, as I'm sure none of you have either. I just want to pick up something you said actually about the defending prices as well. I wrote at length about it in Talisman Theory, which is I think Surya, all about FPL, and I are planning to release it on the last day of July, I think. But something that was really interesting was that last year you had 10 players over 20 non-pen XGI last year. It was the first time it's ever happened. Normally you kind of get to about kind of 5, 6 on average, but you had far more players get in there last year. And they're most goals ever. I think it's 2018-19 was the highest before that. And then there were quite a few when it was a not a 20-team Premier League. And we only saw that Arsenal defenders were useful last year. The rest of them really weren't. So defenders just... to me, I think it's got a bit of a blanket downgrade. And as you kind of correctly say, in my view, that necessitates you being able to therefore fit in a lot of the players that you want going forward, which I think is overall a bit of a throwback, perhaps, where you kind of can feasibly decimate your defence. Like back in the last few seasons, we've been thinking, oh, you know what, I need an expensive defender to start the year with. A couple of years ago when Lucy was on, we both started the season with Cancelo and Edison, for example.
Yeah.
The likes of Trent and Van Dijk, having both of them on game week 1, Trent and Robertson on game week 1. But those days are not far away. Whereas this year, it really looks like, as potentially sort of a reaction to last year, we are looking at the decimation of those defences. That's why I like the Trent call, for example. It could be kind of ahead of the curve. That a player like that could come through. I've seen kind of a few drafts out there. Most of them do have kind of an Arsenal defender, be it Gabriel or Saliba, just sat there thinking, you know what, I can just set and forget that. I think that Saliba's like one of the highest owned players at the moment. Not that matters at all.
Yeah, 39%.
Yeah, it definitely kind of strikes me as quite an interesting one, that's for sure. And with the Haaland price, Sam, I mean, we were talking about it as the prices were released. I mean, you were saying that you kind of think they've kind of set up this idea, and I think Moni said it in the chat, that you can have basically this kind of Haaland's plus almost definitely Salah with the away game week 1 against the Ipswich team, or you have kind of a dispersal of your funds and a bit more value in it. And I feel like we're both kind of saying quite a lot that it kind of is stoking that division and kind of making that more of a choice. And I guess the 15 million is testament to that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the correct thing that they've done as well, because before now there was really no debate. You almost certainly went with Haaland and probably Salah from the off as well. There were the odds draft. There were some odd drafts out there last season that probably didn't have one or the other, but within a few weeks, I think Haaland was 86% owned and the highest owned player possibly ever in FPL history. So they needed to do something. And okay, he didn't have the highest point scoring season last year, but he was injured for quite a lot of it. When he was fit, he was still racking up the points at an alarming rate. So it makes sense that they've done that. And it does cause that decision to be made now, where a lot of managers will look at that price and legitimately and probably fairly say, I reckon I can cover this off with a much more well-rounded 11 or 12, 13, 14 as well. So I can see it going either way. I think it'll be really hard to kind of have the belief in yourself that this will work out come game week 1, because game week 2, home to Ipswich, he is by far the best captaincy shout. So it's going to take some amount of bravery to go without him in game week 1, even if it is Chelsea in the first week. But I think over the long run, it is possible now to cover him off with a more well-rounded 11. Some of the upgrades you can make by, say, removing Haaland, 6 million down to Watkins. I think it's 6 million down to Watkins. And yeah, 9 million. And then using that 6 million in the midfield to upgrade a 5.5 and a 6 million midfielder or 6.5 million midfielder, up to the likes of Saka, a Palmer, a Foden, an Eze as well falls into that a little bit too. There are plenty of options there that with the Haaland draft, you're not going to be able to get more than maybe one, possibly two, and if you include Salah in there as well. So yeah, I quite like the look of a Haalandless draft now. It is very dangerous though to get too locked in on that, because all he has to do really is flutter his eyes, put up a post on Instagram saying he's back. And remember, he hasn't been doing anything during the summer. He's been rested. So he'll be coming back fully fit, firing. It's going to be a pretty nightmarish thought to anyone going without him. It's just whether or not you can cover off the points.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of points here. I misspoke earlier. It was Morgan Rogers who scored a brace. Marcus has clarified, not Bernardo.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And yeah,
essential.
Yeah, essential indeed. And I guess people may also kind of be thinking on Haaland that you can get away with Foden, for example, and just hope to kind of make it work that way. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It is very difficult to conceive at the moment of a world where you go into that game week 2 unless you've got very, very large cojones, or the other genders versions of said cojones, you know, to go that way. I do sort of, you know, for me, there's part of me that thinks I'm not even sure I want to have a look at a team without those two and open that door. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's kind of better to leave that thread unpulled. It's like back in the day when people would kind of say, "Oh, you know, check out this no Salah draft." You know,
Yeah.
it feels like a step that just doesn't seem particularly necessary. I mean, yeah, I know Foden outscored Haaland last week on the basic numbers. Haaland was actually the talisman. If you just look at the attacking numbers, very, very, very kind of, it's very close between the two of them, but Haaland was a talisman if you take out clean sheets and appearance. So I mean, and plus the BPS, as we've got in a minute, does favour Haaland to a little bit more. But it's kind of, actually it's not as close, it's not as kind of favoured because Foden was only a tiny bit behind him in terms of shot on target, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that he will still garner a lot of interest. It's interesting to see that there are kind of a lot of people kind of currently doing the whole, oh, but if you move Haaland, I can get this, I can get that. It's just that we're so far out now, and we'll always see this. And to me, it just feels like a thread I don't want to pull at, because there's no sort of sense of reality about that. So I want to make sure that I'm firmly rooted in how I'll actually be feeling. It's very hard to kind of, the future projection is very difficult to kind of get, but having been in that situation so many times when I've got to a certain game week where I'm looking at it thinking, oh crap, I don't own player X, and especially if there's a player that loads of people are going to captain, like we've all done it. We've all had to kind of panic and buy a player or go and hide behind the sofa for a whole weekend. And you know, yeah, I've really struggled to see myself without Haaland at the moment. But yeah, and lots of stuff there, and we'll definitely get into the prices a lot more next week, and that's kind of a very, very quick sweep. And there's anything you want to add, Sam? I think maybe we should move on to the game changes. I think that's kind of what we'll probably cover off in this pod more than anything.
Yep.
So 5 free transfers. So I think we were a bit surprised by this. There was obviously a couple of people in the community who did know about this very, very early on, but we found out that everyone else did. Lots of ramifications, I think, of this. And I think just from opening gambit, for me, I see this as a bit of a win-win. So for less engaged managers, Sam, they get transfers to play with whenever they remember to log in later on down the line.
Yeah.
So, you know, if Sharon from Accounts, a very famous person on our Slack, forgets to log into FPL for weeks and weeks and weeks, but logs in kind of after game week 5, game week 6, it's not the case that suddenly, you know, everything's lost. They're still able to make some changes, you know, try to reinvigorate their team, etc., etc. So maybe it enhances stickability for individuals who maybe would have disappeared by October. On the other side, we anoraks get a deeper layer of strategy when it comes to this. Like, there's so many manifestations of how you can use this in strategy that I don't think we were even able to conceive of quite yet, because it's quite new, of course. And there's also kind of an element of needing to see it sort of applied before we're able to really understand how this can be plus or a minus, I guess, when the actual game is going on. But either way, I think it's definitely true that there's a deeper layer of strategy which can potentially be employed now. A lot more planning really is sort of infused in FPL, which I think is always a kind of something that engaged managers kind of really favour. And I do think the template as well is slightly impacted. The idea of there being a template, because more transfers available, unless people are properly copycatting, means that there are lots more different situations, different scenarios for people to be in. And I think it'll be harder potentially for people to be stuck in the same template. Now the parameters for that template have widened, because unless you are, copying a content creator very closely, and I think it will become even more obvious if someone is copying content creator really closely. Say, let's look at FPL. Andy who has a certain team and happens to have 4 free transfers in game week 12. I mean, it's going to look pretty suspicious if someone else has pretty much exactly the same team and exactly the same number of transfers. Like, there's an extra element added in there, which I think hopefully would mean that the template is sort of more easily challenged, or may I say, with the pricing as well, there are more plausible routes to take outside of a particular template. So hopefully that idea of kind of just safety and everything like that will kind of give way a tiny bit. But as we'll discuss in a minute, there are kind of ways in which you are motivated to act quite cautiously now. But yeah, that's kind of my initial thought. Ram, with the win-win idea. I mean, do you think that that's a good ramification from the pricing, or have I kind of got that wrong? What do you think?
No, I completely agree with everything you said there. It is a win-win. One thing I would add though is I could put a bet on right now that neither me nor you are going to ever get to 5 free transfers this season. I think it will more likely than not benefit.
100%.
Yeah. It will more likely than not benefit the casuals more than the engaged managers, because let's face it, we get itchy trigger fingers, and you see a captain that you like or a form player after 4 or 5 game weeks, you've been good with your transfers, you can't quite get to them easily. It is going to be difficult to resist when you've got 3 or 4 free transfers. And another thing to note is the additional benefit of each free transfer decreases with each extra one you've got. So from having 1 free transfer to 2, there's a huge benefit to that. But from going from 4 to 5, there isn't as much of a massive benefit week to week, because as FPL managers, we will more likely than not prioritize the weakest point in our side and upgrade it to the best possible player we can at any given moment. That's transfer number 1. With each extra transfer you've got, the weight and difference between A versus B is going to decrease ever so slightly. By the time you get to transfer number 4, transfer number 5, okay, yes, you could have wholesale changes, but the expected gain from that 4th or 5th transfer is on average going to be much lower than the gain from the first transfer or the second transfer. So one thing I don't want to get too bogged down in, whilst I think it's a very good thing, I love that they've done that and it does provide other strategies for us to exploit. I don't want to get too bogged down into an obsession of I need to bank 3 or 4 or get to 5 and hope that it's this magical aid to me later on in the season. I would prefer to fix the most important issues week to week, or decide that at the time. And okay, fine, if the expected gain is fairly low or I'm not confident, it gives me more reason to not burn a transfer this year. And I think that will be the difference. I can see me going from 2 free transfers to 3 quite regularly. Beyond that, maybe 4 once or twice, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get to 5 ever, if not maybe once this season, because let's face it, injuries happen, form players come in. To get to 5, you're going to have to roll for 5 weeks or 4 weeks, let's say. That is very, very difficult to do in any point of an FPL season. So I don't want to become too obsessed with it. The benefit is definitely there, though.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say exactly that. Even though I do like this, and as I said, there is a potential deep layer of strategy. When have you ever, as an FPL manager, been in a situation when you can burn a transfer? When have you ever had that? When has there ever not been a problem in your team? Like, that is kind of inconceivable to anybody who's played this game. What it will do is it will I think, motivate you in those weeks when you're in a scenario when you could make a move. When in the past, maybe you'd have been 60-40 yes. I think now you're
Yeah,
going to be 60-40 roll. That, I
I would
think, is
agree with
probably
that.
where
Yeah,
it's going to impact us. And I agree with you that I think 3 FTs is going to be the sweet spot for
yeah.
most engaged managers. I think that will be kind of the max that we get to. I think if you get to 5, I mean, you're going to be on a serious tear, or you're going to be AFK. I mean, that's the only
Mm.
way I can possibly see that actually happening. I think at the start of the season as well, you've got we've got loads of different possible scenarios, but 2 kind of scenarios that come to mind. One, if you are absolutely bang on the money game week 1, like bang on with say 11 or 12 of your players, and you can just kind of just trust your player to get through to game week 7, your team to get through to game week 7, then you could possibly wildcard into the newest template and still wildcard with 5 free transfers in the bank. I mean, that is kind of the dream scenario, and you could just snowball your advantage all the way to the end. I think you'd be absolutely done. But
If anyone
I think,
manages that, I will
yeah,
be stunned.
that is, you've won FPL effectively, and I think that there is
Mm.
this sort of snowballing which could happen. I think that is a layer of strategy which we could kind of act to, where you kind of say, okay, I'm going to wildcard into this particular team for this particular thing, cover off all these eventualities. But in the later end of the season, when we're not sure which teams are doubling, you may think, well, I'm holding 3 transfers back or 4 transfers back if you're in that situation, because I may need to kind of think, well, okay, Everton have got a great run for 3 games, but when it's like double, I might want to swap out my double Everton for double this, and then there may be a few other kind of adjustments I can make. But I think those are kind of the other things that possibly happen. But early on in the season, everyone's obsessed with value generation, and everybody is kind of, as you say, just trying to do their best. And there's something that you said you were going to try to improve on this year, to try to course correct as early as possible from game week 1. And once that's logged in, once that's set, we at the moment we can make infinite transfers when we've got a bit of a whim about a certain player. We can throw him in, see how it looks. That doesn't happen on the games a lot. It's all over then. Everything's a lot more sort of cold, considered and disciplined. And I think that will kind of, I guess, change the game state, the mind state for a lot of managers, which I think is probably going to be quite interesting. So burning free transfers, I think that never happened anyway, really, unless you were really on the tear, you had no problems. But I think that's now dead. I don't really see that happening unless you are a zombie team.
Mm.
Hits, Sam. I think hits are going to be terrible now. Like, really, really hold you back. I mean, I think back in the day, obviously, back in the day, i.e. last season, not very long ago, 3 months ago, hits they're still bad, right? -4 is a -4 is a -4. But there was always sort of an element of, if you were taking a hit, unless you were kind of really kind of taking a punt or making an opportunity, whatever you want, however you want to phrase it, hits, I think, are going to be much less sort of coverable, and you're going to be hurt a lot more because the rest of the field is less likely to be taking hits than ever before. It's kind of proper hardcore aggression to be taking hits now, and I think that you're really strongly needing your players to come through if you do bring them in. The equation to work. We don't measure hits anymore over kind of 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think we measure them over kind of a very short space of time, because the rest of the field is not likely to be taking hits anymore. We've seen several occasions over the last few years where we've gone into the game week and the safety is already -1, maybe even -2 on some kind of double game week,
Yeah.
because loads of people taking hits that week. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I suppose that we will see a lot of people who still kind of, despite the fact that the free transfers are there, well, they'll still play as they did before. So we'll still have the itchy trigger fingers, still be in a situation where taking -8s. But I think a lot of the studied field, a lot of the engaged field are going to be sat there with 3, 4 free transfers ready to go for the big sort of halcyon moments of the season. So I think the hits are going to be a lot more dangerous this year, because it is kind of, it is always dangerous, but I think more so than ever, especially kind of at the big kind of grandstand moments of the season. Maybe I'm being too negative about hits. I know they're always going to be a part of the game, but I do wonder whether kind of not taking a hit as much as you possibly can. I mean, maybe it's kind of smash in case of real danger, but I just don't really see it. I don't really. I think you're now so much more able to get through the season without taking a hit, unless, of course, unless you're taking kind of one very early on in the season, which probably is going to be okay. To be fair, it's just later on when things really start to snowball, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think there will be almost like isolated windows where we'll see clusters of hits now, where, okay, there's an important fixture swing happening, or a lot of wild cards are getting hit. Some managers just won't be using the wild card, but they'll want to catch up, let's say, with whatever the template seems to be at that moment. Not all of those managers are going to have 4 or 5 free transfers to use. In fact, I care to wager a lot of them won't. So I think that hits are going to be probably seen in more clustered areas of the season where there are those big moments, and therefore for all of the good planners there will be a massive group that, for whatever reason, maybe they've gotten unlucky with injuries, maybe they just fell behind the template early on and they were never able to recover the free transfers. They're not going to have those banked, and they'll still need the hits to catch up, and they'll be willing to use the hits to get back to the template that are 2 or 3 free transfers ahead of them at that time. So I do still see hits being a factor. I do agree that maybe we'll see on average slightly less of them week to week. But for every good planner out there, there's also a manager that's A, gotten unlucky, B, maybe not planned so well, or C, completely fell out of the game for a few weeks and got back to it and just went for a massive Hail Mary rather than using a wild card. So any of those things could happen. I don't think they'll be as important or as easy to use as previously, but I still think there will be a factor. And I'm not going to get myself into a state where I'm scared to use one, even if I think it is for the best for my team. I think it will just happen less regularly that it will be the best for my team.
Perfect. No, that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe I am kind of slightly overdoing it in terms of overemphasizing it a little bit. I just think that it will be sort of not quite a dying art, but I think it will be something which, as the season progresses, so not so much early doors, but later on, when we've kind of really hit a bit of momentum, it's going to be more and more difficult to take them. Dabby in the chat has said that the 5 transfers, I think, benefits the semi-casuals, those that might forget over Christmas, that basically gain an extra wild card to get back into the mix, which is exactly kind of what I was getting at, really, with saying it's a bit of a win-win,
For sure.
really, overall. But yeah, no, really good point there as well, that it kind of helps a lot of people who, there are loads of choke points in the season people historically give up. I mean, I think the biggest one is probably getting to the October. Frankly, after international breaks, people start to forget, start to kind of, people start to not care anymore. The anoraks kind of don't really, they're kind of like, oh, do I do my team again? Oh, I got 50 points last week, and the guy in the marketing team who's really into it got 75 points. Well, I'm screwed now. It's all over. So hopefully that's kind of what they're trying to curtail. But yeah, really good point. What I said about the template, Sam, just to kind of pick that back up again, I was kind of saying that, maybe it kind of erodes it a little bit. But I've seen quite a few other people who were kind of maybe thinking that this wasn't exactly the radical change they wanted to see, were saying that actually it makes it a lot easier for the template to continue. What's your view on that?
Yeah, interesting. I think the template will come and go as always. There are always moments where the template seems a bit obvious, and then that it will kind of evaporate over 2 or 3 weeks. I think that will happen in ebbs and flows this season once again, but probably in a more extended way because of the 5 free transfers potentially. It means that, in my view anyway, more patient managers are able to get back to a template, even if they're quite far away from it. So we might see 3 or 4 weeks where the template kind of moves in 2 or 3 directions. Managers use a free transfer here, free transfer there, maybe go for an Anthony Gordon over an Eze, maybe go for a Watkins over an Isak, whatever. And then maybe after 2 or 3 weeks, it becomes quite obvious that you've made the wrong 50-50 call on both of them. You can quite easily get back to what the main template is at that point. So I think we'll see maybe 2 or 3 weeks of the template kind of running in 2 or 3 directions, and then it will come back to a Constantina effect, a group think, I guess would be the other way of putting it. But I do think rather than the free transfers, I think it's the pricing that actually makes the biggest difference to the template. And I think, as we discussed at the start of the show, there are now just so many different paths you can take. And honestly, even with 3, 4, 5 free transfers, because of the amount of different combinations you can use, barring having the perfect 5 transfers to use because you've, for whatever reason, burn transfers for 3 or 4 weeks, even though your team is clearly not operating at maximum capacity, it's going to be quite difficult to get back to one given template at any time, because Haaland's at 15, because Salah's at 12.5, because you've also now got Palmer, Saka, Son, Foden, Watkins, Isak to all consider at fairly premium prices. We just quite simply can't have them all. And in any given week, one of them or 3 or 4 of them could go off and the other 3 or 4 won't. And it will be very tempting to split apart once again. So I think we'll see fleeting moments of templateness in the bigger game weeks where there are, like I said, the big fixture swings, the wildcard weeks, the free hit weeks, things like that. But on the whole, I think it's probably much better for the variety this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing just how much variety there is in our game week 1 drafts. Not today, but by the time we all get to game week 1, it will be interesting to see whether we have kind of snuck into old habits and we all end up on a very similar team due to a bit of groupthink. We're all listening to the same content creators, we're all looking at the same advice and the same tips, or whether or not, because it's all so tight, we can kind of come to different conclusions that are all equally or fairly equally valid.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's just interesting. I think it's just good to have something different. You know, we've all kind of gone into the last few seasons hoping that a change would be made, and we've been disappointed scanning through the rules that nothing's really happened, if at all. I think the last big change I can think of is a deadline changing, and then before it's coming in. So I mean, this is big. It is big, and I do think it's a very positive thing to have a different game to play. And I think the ramifications of the difference of what they've injected, I think even those things are beyond their foresight, really. So we may end up kind of by the end of the season thinking, oh, there's a perfect way to actually play this, or there isn't a particular way that you can play this to game it properly. Tom Campbell, hey Tom. Congratulations. He's recently joined me in the Dad Club. He asked,
congrats.
do you guys think early doors people wrongly fixate on hoarding free transfers and therefore miss out on value accrual on their side by not chasing early bandwagons? I think that's really interesting, and I think that was kind of actually nice linking into my final point, Tom, which was how play styles I think going to be teased out here a little bit, because risk taking will potentially, I think, be a bit less. I said earlier on, when you're in the 50-50, 60-40 area, a lot of the time you will think, you know what, I'm going to hold it back for a week. And in some people's cases, that's a good thing. For me, that's probably a good thing, because there are so many times, looking at you, Ollie Watkins last year, I've made the wrong 50-50 choice, and I didn't really have that extra incentive just to leave it. Whereas this year, there is that incentive. You could kind of be in a situation where you think, you know what, okay, I'm going to leave it this week, and then by next week that problem may have sorted itself out, and you're there with kind of 2 free transfers, you can get another one, and kind of life goes on. But I do think risk taking will be a bit less this year in terms of the play style, because there's this greater incentive to stick and stockpile free transfers. Will it be the case early doors, in the maelstrom, in the utter disarray that early season is? As Sam mentioned earlier on, people are kind of chasing the template here and there. It goes off in all sorts of different directions. You've got random players picking up with a couple of goals, and we're all kind of thinking, oh, are they the next Lingard? We will see that phenomenon happen again. So I don't know. I think there will be kind of a few sort of out there kind of thinking, you know what, I'm just going to stick to it. I'm going to stockpile it. Don't think I'll get all the way to game week 7. But I think, you will probably see people kind of going past the usual point. Normally you'd be kind of go through game week 1, roll it into game week 2, and game week 3 make 2 free transfers, or maybe even mini wildcard. You may be people going past that point now. But I do think there's going to be, and the nature of the FPL churn is always that, which Sam alluded to earlier, that you're always going to see this need to make a change a lot of the time. Those trigger fingers are going to be so itchy. Those feet are going to be so itchy, bouncing up and down. I think that en masse, the free transfers aren't really going to be kind of stockpiled properly until later on in the season when we've already accrued that value,
Yeah.
and we've got a feel for how the season's going to go. Is that about right, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Marcus, FPL Bateman in the chat, also makes a good point that because a lot of people will be more cautious in part, especially at the start of the season, there's more reason or opportunity there to go the other way and try and steal a march on them by being more aggressive with your moves and not holding on to those transfers. Because, okay, there is risk attached to doing so. Obviously, you could end up in a worse position, but you could also end up in a much, much better position getting on the players early, building the value in them before other players get there, because they're waiting 2 or 3 weeks longer than they maybe should do because they aren't yet completely sold on the player. They're not completely convinced that the form is going to last or maintain across a longer period. So yeah, look, if you're a manager who plays on gut quite a lot and a lot more on eye test and instinct, then this could be the season for you if you're willing to take those gambles and fight against the more cautious approach. There's positives to both, don't get me wrong, but I think there's definitely a narrative building that this is the year of caution and taking your moments sparingly. But you know what? Aggression does pay dividends in FPL. I got burnt by not being aggressive enough at times last year, and I don't want to get into a mood or a moment in the season where I'm 99% sure on a transfer and I'm like, oh yeah, but I could just roll it and I'll make the decision next week, and then it obviously bites me in the arse again. I would prefer to have the bravery to go with it. So yeah, I think he makes a good point, and I'm looking forward to seeing how those different play styles manifest in the opening few weeks.
And you know what? That links me back to what I was saying about different play styles really being drawn out by this, and people's kind of natural play styles are going to be kind of really clear. But yeah, I think it is a year that you can actually be fairly aggressive, and the counter narrative, so what you said, Sam, creates so much opportunity. If other people are being quite conservative, small c, with what they're doing, then you can take those chances and potentially benefit. And that, I think, is going to be a really interesting dynamic as the year goes forward. Cool. Bonus changes, the other thing that we've seen. 2 bonus points, BPS, I should say, not bonus points, for a shot on target, which wasn't in there before. There was a minus 1 for SOT, shot off target, which includes hitting the woodwork. If you listen to Guardian Football Weekly, you know Troy Townsend thinks that's a shot on target. It's not a shot off target. 1 BPS for being fouled, minus 4 BPS for goalkeeping and defenders, conceding a goal, which I think is a massive one.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah,
10 points for a goalkeeper goal. Edson on pens. Is it finally going to happen? Right. So 2 bonus point system points for a shot on target. I don't know that this is actually going to be as big as people think it is, honestly. So can I just do something and read off the top 10 for players?
Please do. I was going to do similar.
Yeah, Haaland, Foden, Watkins, Salah, Darwin Nunez, lol. Son, Nicholas Jackson, maybe lol. Cole Palmer, Julian Alvarez, Jared Bowen, Alexander Isak, and Matthias Cunha just outside of that. None of those players are players who are popping massively in terms of being like, oh, that's really unusual. I'm shocked that he's taking loads of shots.
Darwin.
So especially on target. I think Darwin's like, XG versus non-pen XG minus XG was like pretty low last year. I think it was like -4 or something like that. I'm pretty sure he was like second. I'm pretty sure he was second or third, no, maybe even fourth for that. I was looking at it for Talisman Theory the other day, but none of those players really striking me as being shocks for the system, really.
The players you'd have anyway, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, what is interesting is if you look at the percentages of shots on target from those players, i.e., the other side of it, how many points are actually losing for shot and getting shots off target. Of those players, you've only got Nicholas Jackson in the top 20. Actually, Son's just in the top 20, with 47.5% of his shots actually being on target. Son's 45, so is Foden, Haaland's 44, etc., and so on and so on. So, in some ways, actually, all it's doing is cancelling out the negative effects of these players in terms of their shooting, which is good. It's a nice little kind of add-on to go from a net negative to a net neutral with these players. But it's not huge. It's nice. It's good that it's there. We've said for many years that I remember kind of back in the day when Mo Salah was always being kind of penalized for in terms of the bonus. He'd score a goal or score a couple of goals and he'd get no bonus. People are like, why is he not getting any bonus? Oh my god! And I'd be like, just read the rules. It's obviously there. He's taking other shots on target. So hopefully the point of this is that players who are affecting the game positively are doing something. And they're getting rewarded for that somehow in the point system, which I do kind of get, but I don't think the ramifications of this are going to be particularly seismic. Obviously, I'll be listening to Above Average's view on this with great interest later on this week. I think it's on this weekend. But yeah, I think that's kind of point one of that. Anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a final point because you wrapped that up really well. Could you just answer for me, if you've got the spreadsheet in front of you, how many shots on target did Haaland, I presume the top, have last season?
50.
50. So that is, let's say he didn't start every game, but let's say he started somewhere between 25 and 30. That's less than
31, I think.
31, fine. That is less than 2 shots on target per game on average. So that is potentially 2 BPS additional per shot on target times maybe around 1.5 for Haaland. And that is the best one in the game for this metric. So like you said, it will make a difference. It's not going to make a massive difference. And this is just in bonus points system. It's not like that gets him extra FPL points. We need to calculate that in and bake that into the players around him. He might have also, if he's gotten lots of shots on target in one specific game, he's probably also had quite a few shots off target because it means that he's had a lot of attempts in general. So like you say, I think it balances it out, but I don't think it makes a massive difference. And I just wanted to summarize that for anyone thinking that maybe Haaland's got 300 shots on target across the season and therefore it is going to be way better on the bonus points for him. It's not going to make as big a difference as maybe some people are thinking.
Yeah, and to colour that even further, Haaland had the most shots last year as well, 113. So 44% of his shots were actually on target. So for every 1 shot on target he was taking, 2 of his shots were off target. So you're getting 2 BPS for a shot on target, and you're getting -1 for a shot off target. So he's getting a net 0 effectively every game. It's just backing up my point.
It's better than a net -2 though.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So it does make a difference. It's just not.
We will come back to this very quick, in for the defenders and goalkeepers in a second, in terms of how this actually affects things. But just to the sandwich point of 1 BPS for being fouled, this is not something I'm excited by, really. I mean, it is nice. There's one name in particular which does come to mind, which I will speak about in a minute. But I wouldn't be excited about this too much. So last year, the top player for drawing fouls was
Bruno Guimaraes.
It was 108 fouls drawn, so 2.8 fouls per game. That was an absolute. He got 108, right? Second, Jordan Ayew, 94, and then there's a bit of a drop off, 19 less fouls drawn to get to Mohamed Kudus on 75, and then you progress downwards from there. Really nice for players like Saka and Gordon. It's a feather in their cap as well. So Saka was fouled 69 times, Gordon 67 times. That's only 2 per game. But it's 2 additional DPS, which is always a nice pro. The thing is that these players were always likely to be in bonus anyway if they contributed something. And if it's a game where it's there are fine margins, etc., and so on and so on, that's always quite useful to you. But if there's a game where things are really going off all around the place, it just, I guess, nudges them a little bit more into getting
marginal gains, isn't it?
Yeah, bonus, and that is where it lies. That it's marginal gains, exactly. And that was going to be my point there.
Sorry, I didn't mean to finish off your own point.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm glad we're both on the same wavelength. I was half thinking, I was half expecting you to be like, oh no, actually, this is great because.
No, exactly the same. And I think I was listening to The Wire on my way back. Not the hit TV show, the FPL Wire, of course, much better. And they were talking about not letting it over way too heavily on our minds going into this season, and I think that's really important. The bonus points changes or the BPS system changes will make a difference, but let's not pretend that it's going to make a huge difference and change the landscape of which players are good and which players are bad completely. It's not going to do that. It's going to slightly tweak some up, slightly tweak some down. Players like Foden are going to be maybe 5% more appealing, probably even less than that, but a little bit more appealing because he gets fouled a lot, because he gets a lot of shots on target, and because defenders, as we'll come on to as well, are slightly weighed down, probably, I would say, too far weighed down based on what we're about to talk about, and are therefore less likely to get the bonus points altogether in comparison to the forward players, the midfielders forwards, who get the shots on target, who get fouled quite a lot. So I think that's really interesting. I think there will be more weight now on the midfielders and the forwards. They'll, on average, probably get 5-10 points more this season, whereas the defenders will probably get 5-10 points less on average across the season because of these changes.
Yep, and that really nicely links into the -4 BPS for defenders and goalkeepers including a goal.
Yeah.
It does
Is that
lend...
per goal?
It is per goal, yes.
Yeah.
It does lend the idea that they can be kind of slightly devalued in terms of where you allocate your resources at the start of the season. Just because, I mean, I spoke about this at length in Talisman Theory, and as I mentioned earlier on, there were so many goals last year that I think maybe they've kind of reacted to that a little bit, but it does kind of make defenders a bit placeholdery almost to some extent. I mean, if they're kind of, even if they get an attacking return, I mean, there's been loads of times where you've seen kind of a defender, even if they've kind of drawn 1-1, gets an assist, and they're kind of in the bonus. We're going to see that less and less this year. And I think that, as you say, it's kind of a little bit more of a penalisation than I'd have liked for defenders. Really, is my take from that. And I think that it kind of slightly just diminishes the appeal in terms of allocating those players your precious resource at the start of the year. There are exceptional circumstances for a player like Trent. If Guardiola continues his trajectory, then you kind of are in with some vestige of a hope of kind of decent level of consistency of attacking returns to kind of even out this negative. But what I'm saying is, if you do have a Trent, right, and he gets an assist in a 3-1 victory, the fact is that he's less likely to be in the bonuses than he was in the years gone by. Therefore, making your investment in a player like Trent a lot kind of less worth the money than if you've got a player like Anthony Robinson, for example, who gets an assist. That's great. You got the attacking return. You got a 6 last season or something like that. Decent enough XA or something like it was all right, but it feels better to be paying 4.5 million for a player who is involved in attacking build-up for his team to the eye, is statting okay-ish relative to the price that you're paying, versus paying for a high cost defensive asset who does have attacking potential. Because if they do concede, it becomes a lot harder for them to, I guess, get into the bonus, especially because scoring a goal is weighted towards the strikers massively. As you probably should know. If you don't know, it is pretty insane how much a striker goal actually counts towards the BPS. A striker goal is 24, a midfielder is 18, and a defender or a goalkeeper is 12, and assists are 9, regardless of which player actually provides it. So, really, it means that attacking returns from defenders, I mean, they stay as they were, but the penalisation is there, and that's kind of a new negative, effectively, upon these individuals. I think the defence can probably be something that you can start the season at least being less worried about covering the highest points for, but we'll get into that next week.
Yeah, completely agree. I think, in my view, probably just about find one space for a more premium defender, in my opinion, and then probably wiggle between 3 or 4 of them in the opening few weeks, depending on which one seems like the team that to back defensively. Outside of that, the 4.5s, there's such a big cluster of them this season at good value in good teams that keep a decent amount of clean sheets, and in teams as well that, okay, they might not keep clean sheets every week, but when they do, it's likely a 1-0 or a 2-0 at most. So we're looking at the Evertons of the world as the prime example. You get a 4.5 defender there. If they manage to keep a clean sheet, the strikers and the midfielders are less likely to be getting loads of shots on target, loads of fouls as well, and just because they're attacking much less. So the defenders are more likely to be getting the bonus points in those matches than they would in, say, a 4-0 win for Arsenal when Saliba and Gabriel have barely done anything in the match. Previously, Saliba might have had a decent shot at some bonus points. This probably brings him down a slight notch based on the other side of it, the shots on target, the fouls won, things like that. And then obviously takes them all miles away if they concede anything now, even if they do get some sort of attacking return.
I agree. And, Dabby in the chat, as I said, the top scoring defenders last season was so far off the top scoring mid-distance forwards. It makes fans even less appealing. And I think, there's definitely an element that there's a reaction to what happened last year. There's the old adage that the worst generals prepare to fight the last war and therefore lose the next one. And I think that it's definitely true that you can't, every year is different, and we may see a reaction to what happened last year in terms of the goals scored, and we may kind of see a reprioritization of defence. But it may also be the fact that we've got the best crop of managers ever seen in the Premier League. Russell Martin, hello. So, be really interested to see how it goes this year. Whether last year was an anomaly, there's loads of different reasons why last year could have been an anomaly. Discuss the talisman theory, but it'd be really fascinating to see if that's kind of the way it goes. But I mean, I think that it basically potentially relegates defenders to clean sheet or bust a lot of the time.
A little bit, yeah.
A lot of the time, unless it's a Lundstram, defensive attacking contributions, unless you've got a freak of nature like Trent, are few and far between. They're always overstated. I haven't got the data with me, but I did look at it a couple of years ago for a pod I did, and I remember it being like kind of, I think it's kind of 1 in 6, 1 in 7 or something like that, like a really low, even for a player like Trent getting an attack and return in the game. Like, it was really low, and I think it can be overstated what a player can do. I mean, there's always a sort of idea, the old sort of Craig Dawson bullet header idea when he was at West Brom, Gareth McCauley or something like that, but really, those things don't happen very often. They don't. They really don't. Honourable exception potentially to Gabriel, who every year does kind of
3 or 4 a year on average.
Pretty impressive in terms of the XG, but it's not kind of as high as you can kind of conceptually think about it, which is something which is really important to know. I think I can't remember what it was. Last year it was really, really rubbish for defenders in terms of XG, like really poor. And I think that's kind of only going to continue, to be honest, as kind of things move forward. God, I think it was that Gabriel was like kind of just inside the top 100 from memory. Like, it was really, really low. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see in the first drafts. Spoiler alert. That I'm kind of taking this to heart a little bit. But I may change my mind. Maybe I'll be like, maybe there's going to be the blowback, which is obviously, as I've just mentioned, it could happen. We might see this year being the year of clean sheets. It might be slightly unlikely. Right. Aims for this year, areas for improvement. So I guess we've kind of mentioned a tiny bit about our games. I think it's just worth kind of discussing it a little bit here. So I think for those who haven't been listening for very long, I've had a bit of a torrid time doing social media and who got the assist. So before I was involved with Who Got the Assist, right? Before I started the podcast, I had 62k, 12k, 2k, 21k finish. I was like, yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I'll be great. As it stands, I was rubbish at trying to get my head around social media and content creation, listening to content, absorbing content, and having my own views. So I then had was it 5 years in the wilderness of six-figure finishes. Fantastic. And then 2022, 23, I got 17K last year, just about got top 100K. And I'm kind of just hoping to
You're
build on that
recovering.
again. I am recovering. I just need to build on that again. I think a big positive of the 5FT thing is in that scenario that I've mentioned a couple of times when you're 50-50. Like I almost always twist. Almost
Yeah, you
always.
do.
That's just the way I am. And this gives me the push I need potentially to keep my powder dry more. Have you heard of burnt toast theory?
No, I
No,
don't
so
think it
it's
rings
the
a bell, but please do remind me. I'm not
so
sure what
so
it is.
it's the idea that you're going out, you're rushing out the door, and you're kind of quick doing some toast for your breakfast, and your toast burns, right? So you miss your train, and you later find out that train, something
Oh, yeah.
terrible
Okay.
happened, and you'd be on that train if it wasn't for the burnt toast. So inadvertently, you've saved yourself, a massive delay, or maybe even worse. So
Hmm.
maybe kind of leaning into that idea of burnt toast theory, maybe the fact that I know that if I roll my transfer, maybe things will sort themselves out. I'll save myself from myself looking at selling Ollie Watkins for Darwin Nunez again, which we both did last season, which has really stayed with me, Sam. It's
Yeah,
really upset me.
haunting.
So maybe that's going to keep my powder dry, I think, and trusting in my team. Probably that's something I need to do because I did that so many times in the season that I had a really good season a couple of years back. So maybe that's kind of something that I think I want to improve on. And the other thing is just trying to get over being too FPL-y in my watching of football. I think at the start of the
Mm.
season, I'm bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, really interested in watching football. When you get to maybe November, December time, if I'm not doing well, not doing as well as I want to be, and let's face it, not doing as well as I want to be means I'm not in the top 10K, I think it's probably fair to say. And I'll sometimes just not want to watch football anymore because all I can see is, oh, that was a
FPL
miss.
point.
I could have got points there. Oh, that should have been an assist. That should have been a goal. And I
Mm.
think it is, yeah, okay. I mean, we haven't really, it's kind of the elephant in the room. We've not really spoken about planners and solvers. I think we should probably talk about that at some point. Probably not today, though. But I think that, these things are always the antecedent to a player popping in the plans and solvers, popping in the data, and the little things that you spot within the games that you watch. And I think this year we're looking at having a prices point or something like that, where you look at the games you've watched over the weekend and anything that you kind of spotted, which I think is going to be quite handy. But
Mm.
I think I need to try to do my best within reason, because I've got a young child, I haven't got that much time with my other half, so I need to prioritize that. But try to kind of at least make sure that I'm watching the highlights or something, just to make sure that I'm supplementing, looking at the data with some semblance of being able to pick out how individual team movements have changed, especially if there's a new manager or something else has kind of swapped around, and that hopefully will give you a bit of a heads up. I'm thinking of like some Mateta when Glasner came in, or Kai
Mm.
Havertz going in forward position. Two things which are covered in Talisman Theory, which is coming soon. But yeah, I think
Mm.
those are the two things for me this year. I think we'll come into it maybe a little bit more on the last pod of pre-season. What about you?
Yeah, so I think one, I'm sure you can probably relate to this as well, actually, and it does link to your point. The main thing that I learned from last year, it was my first season on the pod. I was also doing my own YouTube channel for the first time as well, and I think I just absorbed so much FPL content and resources from all angles of the internet as well, that any opinion that I might have had kind of just got kind of diluted, I guess would be the best way of putting it, through the week, to the point where I couldn't even remember what my opinion was to begin with. And I think I need to make a real point this season of not necessarily sticking to my opinions blindly, but making a note of what my thinking is and the logic for that thinking at the start of a week when I'm planning ahead, and researching around it, just like I am, maybe pinning down 3 or 4 good resources rather than just going after absolutely everything. And not only saving myself time, but it means that I'm only hearing from the most trusted of resources, and then using that information to inform whether or not my opinion was completely outlandish or whether I'm onto something. Not necessarily cherry picking data for my opinion in any way whatsoever, because that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It can be very, very detrimental to your decision making process. But openly using the information you've gathered during the week to then kind of sense check whether your initial opinion, your initial thinking was flawed or in the right ballpark. And if there's nothing to disprove it, then going ahead with that thinking rather than just sort of falling into line with the masses based on what the prevailing wind is that week.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that it links exactly to what I was saying earlier on about the torrid time I had doing WTA in the early
Yeah,
days. Like, you kind of
it's
think,
tough.
this person, this person said this. Well, they've done all right in the past few years. Well, I need to do that. Oh, hang on, but this person I also respect said this. Oh my, how do I reconcile these two things? And you end up in a total muddle, don't you?
Yeah,
Especially if
yeah.
you've got, and you can lose yourself. And I'm not going to break into Eminem. I was thinking about it, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
But you can kind of just kind of what I think gets completely kind of subsumed by that. And you're completely right. It's one of my kind of the biggest things that I kind of learned, that I had to kind of keep a note. And you got your famous sexy spreadsheet, Sam. I'm sure there's room for an extra tab for, for Sam's initial thoughts each week, which hopefully we
New
can
tab loading. Yeah.
we can make into a little bit of a piece. But no, I think you're completely right that there's got to be some sort of initial kind of here's what I think. Can we interrogate that? Yeah, there's a bit of content here. There's me looking at the data. There's what I saw when I actually watched the game, and trying to kind of just create some sort of sense of synergy with all of those things to try to come to a point where you're happy with it. And I think kind of I've gotten to the point now where, and if we had this kind of last season, I think you had it too, where there were times when we were really rushed into making decisions, and that's kind of the worst place to be, really, because the process isn't good, and just having these little bits in your process is just so important. So I completely agree with that.
Nice. Yeah, I'd say for now that's probably the main point. We'll definitely visit other sub points. I've got a whole list of them from last year, and I don't want to go through all of them today because we'll be here past midnight and beyond. So yeah, that one for now, and over the next few weeks there are several other smaller lessons that I want to bring up as well.
Cool. Drafts?
I think so. I don't actually know which one of us is first, so let's have a look and see. Oh, it's yours. Right. Let me see this for the first time.
All right. I'll talk you through it. Yeah. So talking about what I said earlier on, my initial thoughts were just sack off the defense, just give up. Doesn't matter. So very cheap in goal. The old kind of 4.5 king and air sort of thing going on with Flecken and Valdimarsson, who I'd only just heard of today. I'm assured that he is probably Icelandic. Who knows? Is he? I don't know. Who knows? I've got 4.5 million defenders and Harwood Bellis. So I've got Licha Martinez, Konsa. I've got Mr. Mikalenko. I've got Timmy Robinson, Jedi Robinson, as he's well known, Harwood Bellis at the back. So basically decimated it to make room for Anthony Gordon. I really like Anthony Gordon. I think he's an excellent FPL asset. The fouled thing I did mention earlier on, he does play a part in that. Another little kind of fact for you all, he was fouled the most, leading to goals last year. So he was the most he assisted the most penalties. Last person who was really popping on that scale, Ryan Fraser. I'll come back to the point in a minute. Leon Bailey is also sitting around in there. I really like Leon Bailey in terms of the underlying numbers. It looks like Diaby is on his bike. Bailey last year was absolutely fantastic in terms of the XGI per night. Oh, no. Marcus FPL Bateman is there as well with me. Excellent. Really like that Bailey guy. The fixtures as well get very, very good. The Arsenal game week 2 is obviously a bit troublesome, but they are at home. Really good fixtures for Aston Villa until game week 9, I think it is. maybe even 10. I think it's like Liverpool in 10, but no, God knows how hard that's going to be. And then you've got Nkunku, who I think is ridiculously under priced at the moment for what he could potentially offer. One of those, a bit of a Mahrez situation where you hope you get in on that early. And if
Yeah,
it does happen, does go off, like, he is a great player. He was third for non-pen XGI in the Bundesliga a couple of years ago. Last year, completely off the radar due to injuries or whatever. But he is a genuinely really exciting player who has been massively undervalued this year. I think he could really kind of just go bananas, frankly. I'm kind of quite bullish about that. But we will see whether I do kind of go over from the off. I know it's Man City straight away, or whether I think, you know what, maybe that's one to kind of keep an eye on and later bring in, because it's not a particularly difficult price point to bring in a player for. Salah, obviously, I've got 4.5, so Rogbonam, Everton signed for PSR reasons, effectively. Could play, could not, but the 4.5s are all rubbish. Haaland, I'm going to stick with Haaland. I think Tom Stevenson in the chat has just said, wow, a Haaland draft. I think that I'm going to have Haaland at the moment. And I said earlier on, Tom, I'm not going to pull that thread of not having Haaland, especially when it comes to game week 2. I think game week 3 I'll reassess, but I think that I'm likely to kind of just go Salah and Haaland and see what happens effectively. At the moment, that's where I am. I know it's really boring to say, but I'm probably going to go template at the start of the season and just see where it leads after that. Because I think the actual kind of interesting part of FPL is much later on, when you kind of get to kind of game week kind of 9, 10 onwards, when things start to really diverge a little bit. Kai Havertz. So I had a look at him in terms of underlying data, his point generation since he moved to being Arsenal's striker, which I think I put a little bit later on in the season. I did it in Talisman Theory. There's around sort of game week 27, but he got 7.58 points per game when he was up front, 0.62 XGI per game, which translates to a 288 point season. And that's much more than Saka, actually. I think that covering, in inverted commas, Arsenal attack is something that's being slightly kind of undervalued at the moment. I know that the ownership level for Havertz is actually pretty decent, but I really like having him in there. I really like João Pedro. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a really, really good price. I know a lot of people have him there, but I really like having Kai Havertz if things continue how they ended last season's exit velocity. And Isaac, I think, is just in. Frankly, again, on an absolute tear at the end of last season, offers everything you really want from a forward in terms of on penalties, really kind of in terms of non-pen XGI, the highest performer for Newcastle. So I think it was like 54% of his points he scored in 13 game weeks. Like, it was over 7 points per game week he scored, something like that at the end of last year. Great fixtures for Newcastle. And crucially, they haven't got anything to worry about apart from the league. That's always what I'm looking for in FPL, honestly. I was definitely looking at Big Dan Burn actually at the back as well, but I don't know what the situation is with him and Lloyd Kelly, who can play left back as well. I don't know whether,
I think a lot of people have forgotten about that signing already.
So I'm not sure about that one. But I really like having Gordon and Isaac together. And I think that there's a whiff of Callum Wilson and Ryan Fraser back in the day at Bournemouth about the two of them together. I really, really like that, and I think it's a relationship that could only get better because they're not in Europe, as I mentioned, and I think that could be really, really good. And Isaac coming in 8.5 was great, because I saw that you can't put Foden and Haaland in the same team, I don't think, but you can put Isaac and Gordon in the same team, and without Europe, I think that is really, really enticing. Bailey could be Morgan Rogers, as fair to I should probably mention, and that would therefore mean that Robinson becomes Gabriel potentially, if I wanted to kind of cover off that that high price defender slot, which is a possibility, especially if Rogers is still playing when it comes to game week 1 and he's looking like he's going to be starting, etc., etc., and so on and so on. The issue is obviously that you end up with a 5.0 and a 4.5 midfielder slot, which makes things a bit more difficult. But it's what it is. If the gamble is always that they start off on the tear and away you go. Well, hey, there you go. That's my team at the moment. I'm not really going to look at it too much until I mean, there was a time when I was tinkering like an absolute madman. Nowadays, I'm pretty chill about it, honestly. Like, I'm not going to really look at this until probably the first week of August. I don't think
Yeah.
I'll be looking at it until then, because I mean, it's there, and whatever. I'm very happy. I'm very kind of happy just to leave it, because it doesn't matter if I make any changes. It doesn't matter, and I'll get to grips with the pricing structure. I'll see what happens. But yeah, decimate the defense. I like Newcastle double up in attack, because I think there'll be loads of goals going on there, and they've only got the league to focus on. Good fixtures, Salah and Haaland and Havertz. And that's the way I've got it at the moment.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'm also pleasantly surprised to see what is possible with Haaland and Salah in the draft. What you've been able to do there, it seems relatively well balanced. Obviously, the omission is in the defense, but there are ways to bring one up, as you said. And to be honest, defense 4.5s, there's a lot of good options there. So yeah, I really, really don't mind it at all. It is, I think I'm right in saying 4 players in your 15 are in mine. So we've got very different drafts.
I've got 0.5 million in the bank. I should also.
And you've got 0.5 million in the bank. So we've got very different drafts. I
very
have gone. Yeah, I have gone Haalandless for now. That is not me locking in without Haaland. I'm not a madman.
It's never gonna happen.
Yeah, I thought I thought I would pull the lever to see what is possible without Haaland. So again, this is not me saying I'm going down this route and I'm pursuing it, but I think it is sensible to have a look at both. If you're not convinced that you're definitely going with Haaland, I think it is worth looking at, in my personal opinion, one without. And I do like the balance that this supplies. So at the back, Sanchez as the 4.5 for now. There is going to be question marks over which Chelsea keeper retains the spots. There are murmurs that Sanchez is in line to keep it, and at 4.5, starting Chelsea keeper, that is absolutely fine by me. And after Man City is out the way, they've got a great run of fixtures to start the season, so I think he will be quite popular. I also like the idea of Brighton keeper as well, whichever one stakes their claim as the starting keeper, because it's unlikely that they'll do the same as last season and have rotating keepers. That just very rarely happens. So 4.5, a Brighton keeper might not be a bad shout. In defense, I should say I've got 4.0. It's Fabianski at the moment. Let's wait and see. I've got no idea which one it's going to end up being, but I'm sure one will emerge soon enough that seems slightly more likely to start. No thought has been put into that whatsoever. In defense, I have found room for Trent Alexander-Arnold, one of the upgrades I'm able to make without Haaland, that would definitely not be able to make if Haaland survived in my draft. I do like Trent. I think the points raised on this pod, even by myself as well, are valid, that the bonus point system probably doesn't necessarily favour him this season. But at 7 million, I think it is a price I quite like for a player of his upside. And even without a couple of bonus points here and there, he should still be relatively good value for money. It also, crucially, I want to be flexible this season. It also provides me an opportunity to get across to any other defender in the game at any moment. So if for whatever reason Liverpool get off to a bit of a stinker, they don't look like a great side, Trent isn't playing a position that's favourable for assists, attacking returns, I can go straight to Gvardiol, I can go straight to the Arsenal defenders, and I don't need to worry about honing in on several free transfers to do it either. I can easily get there, and also it takes money out so I can upgrade elsewhere. So I quite like starting at the top and moving down from there. Obviously I haven't done that with Haaland, which is the major problem here, but we'll get onto that. Otherwise, across the back, it is Mykolenko. So very similar reasoning to you. Really like Mykolenko. 4.5 comparatively to Tarkowski, Pickford and Branthwaite. 0.5 cheaper than any of them. I really like, and he's got some attacking upside too. So again, in a defense that do keep quite a few clean sheets, but also in their team generally they don't score too many goals, he could be on for a few more bonus points this season. Similarly with Dunk as well, really like him as an option. Brighton's defence was, despite not keeping that many clean sheets, actually not a bad one at all last season. Dunk is always good for the odd goal from corners, and the system that should be, I say always, once or twice a season, and a system that should be relatively more comfortable for clean sheets this season than De Zerbi, and the let's say the error prone ways of Brighton last season. They should be much more effective at the back, given what I've heard about the incoming coach. I won't butcher the pronunciation on this pod. I will do my research. Don't worry. Outside Hertzler, right? Okay, good. Right, fine. Okay, so we've both butchered that, I'm sure, but it's fine. Anderson, first sub at the moment. I haven't really thought about starting 11 too much, but I like Anderson quite a lot. Again, 4.5 seems really good value for a defender of his caliber in a decent enough defense as well. And then finally, it would be wrong not to have my first draft without a Southampton player. So Harwood Bellis is the 4.0 of choice. He started... Well, he was the most crucial defender in the lineup for us, or the most consistent one in the lineup for us last season in the Championship. 4.0 gets the odds attacking return from a corner, a set piece. He will be on my bench nearly every single week.
But he's starting at 4.0, isn't he?
Exactly. It should be fine. Barring a real upheaval at the back, we absolutely love him. There is very little chance that he gets rotated or benched this season. I think he'll be a core element of what we're trying to do in the Premier League this season. And Russell Martin was very, very keen to make sure that there was an option to buy, or an obligation to buy rather, for Harwood Bellis if we got promoted. So yeah, super happy that he is a permanent signing for us. Marcus in the chat asks about Sir Charlie Taylor. It is possible that he's a starter at 4.0. I wouldn't want to pin my colours to the mast too early on that one. He should get decent minutes. Walker Peters is probably out of the door, but at the moment we don't know that for sure. He comes in at 4.5, by the way. West Ham are interested at, I think we've asked for 23 million. They're not too keen on that, considering he's only got a year left. If he stays, then it becomes ever less likely that Charlie Taylor is a regular starter. We've also brought in one or two other defenders of high potential, let's say. So outside Harwood Bellis, I wouldn't be hyper confident on any of them just yet. I will be keeping an eye on that, and I will inform all of you when I know a bit more on that and I see a few preseason games and hear a few more press conferences. I might even do a thread on it at some point if anyone's even remotely interested. When we get into the midfield, it's where things get much more interesting. Salah, again, won't need to explain my reasoning on that too much, but I've gone much more beefy in the midfield than you have. So Foden, Palmer, Eze, and then Winks would be my 4.5 million of choice. Again, he's not really expecting to start in my draft at any moment, but he should be a starter for Leicester. So I don't mind it as a 4.5. Again, there might be one that comes out of the woodwork at some point with a bit more attacking upside. Very open to changing that one.
That's a good call, actually. I think I think I should probably put him in, to be honest.
But
whatever, 4.5.
Exactly. It's a 4.5. We'll think about that more closer to the time. But focusing quickly on the three players in the midfield you don't have at the moment. Foden, I think he's due for another big season. KDB's powers will continue to wane slightly. He's still a class act, but you would think that Foden is going to get that central area more and more often. Obviously, last season was his best by a mile, and I expect him to take it up another step this season, especially with the additional shots on target bonus point system stuff and the fouls 1-2. That will benefit him ever so slightly as well. Also, without Haaland in my draft, I do think it's important to have City coverage, especially for that second week. And who knows, maybe that's one of Foden's legendary hat-trick weeks, which he seemed to do every other bloody week last season, especially when I didn't own him. So I can see that happening again, and hopefully I can cash in on that if I go with this sort of shape. Palmer is an interesting one. A lot of people don't have Palmer at the moment. Based on the fact he was with England, he might be a bit overpriced. We don't know the system. I still think he's on for a stormer. His non-penalty XG was 0.35, I think, last season, which for a midfielder is class. Add in the penalties, add in the fact that he should be playing in a very advanced position once again, even if it might not be completely certain exactly where. I still think he's going to be a very, very good pick. I could end up compromising on him. It is an angle I would consider, and maybe that's an Nkunku if it looks like he's a certain starter at 6.5 and his injury problems are no more. Or of course, if I didn't go with Watkins up front, that could be a Bailey, for instance. But for now, I wanted to start off with three big midfielders, and then I can see which one I'm willing to compromise on close to the time, possibly to get me across to Haaland. Eza as well, it's mentioned in the chat. I think he's underpriced at 7. He will be very, very crucial to everything that Palace do this season, especially without Elise in there. Should be on set, the majority, if not all set pieces. His data's good. He's an absolute class act on the eye as well. I think he's going to make a laughing stock of 7 million. And as long as he stays injury free, I can't really see too many ways I go without him for too long this season either. So I'm a big fan. Up front, Isak, again, I currently actually have the armband on him, home fixture. I actually quite like it, even if it is against Southampton. We'll go into that close to the time. Watkins, after the first couple of game weeks, it's a good run for Villa. You've got Bailey. I've gone with Watkins. I think it's important to have some sort of Aston Villa coverage there. Of course, because I don't have Haaland, Watkins is the obvious next player down. 6 million saving has got me a lot of stuff in this lineup as well. And then João Pedro as well. 5.5, I think, is at least 1 million underpriced. If he keeps penalties, I think even more so. And the fact that he's under a new coach. Again, he could easily become a nailed 90-minute man under new management. So I think he, again, could be one of, if not the underpriced gem this season. And I would like to get on him at an early stage. No matter how tempted I am in Adam Armstrong, I just think João Pedro is probably the safer option to start off the season with at 5.5.
Fine. Yeah, I get that. No, it's just, I mean, it's just too early, isn't it, really, to be like, oh, this is that. No, I'm not wedded to my team. I'm sure you're not wedded to yours. It always is what it is. Tom Stevenson in the chat, hi Tom, said that Eza is underpriced. And I kind of agree with that. Like, he's an absolute baller if you watch him play. My only issues are, one, relative and lack of end product. Like, even though he's been less available perhaps over the last couple of years than he would like to be, his per 90 data isn't that great. But we'll see kind of when the proper Glasner experiment comes into play what's going to happen with him. Elise leaving as well, I think it's going to be a big sort of negative for Eza, but I do really like him at that price, that's for sure. It's properly in the fun zone, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fine. I mean, I've got no sort of real big issues with any of the justifications that you've got. I mean, it's just like kind of Palmer. I'm hoping that Nkunku can basically cover him. Watkins for game week 3, you'd be looking at maybe moving Haaland out for Watkins. Would I ever do that? Is the question anyone is going to be asking me. Who knows? And then similarly, you've got Foden and you're backing him for a good season. Will he cover Haaland though? So, I've been asking that question, but we're all in that situation, aren't we? Both of them, both teams are just make absolute sense at this moment, but they don't equally too, because we just don't know. We just don't know. I would not have pegged though that we'd have Mikolenko, Harwood Bellis, Salah, and Isak being our only 4 in common, which I think is quite interesting. And it
all kind of hinges on the Haaland versus no Haaland thing, right? That's the interesting thing here. The templates are so different just based on whether or not you have Haaland in your draft. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that manifests come game week 1.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be it, hasn't it? I mean, there's no other way of really looking at it. There's all kinds of different ways you could kind of play it. I mean, you could kind of look at, as I said earlier on, going with a more sort of defensive heavy sort of way of looking at it. I know that those people have Guardiola sat in there. No, Raya is the highest owned goalkeeper at the moment, mainly because he's the also pick goalkeeper, but a lot of people are kind of looking to him as being kind of a 0.5 million saving on Gabriel and Saliba. Yeah, I mean, we'll look at the prices a lot more next week, and we'll try to kind of get some sort of sense of equilibrium about all of this. But yeah, definitely the next kind of few days is going to be about familiarizing, getting to grips with the pricing structure, trying to get an idea of exactly what we're going to be doing going forward. But I think this is a good time to end it, Sam, because we've talked a lot. With varying levels of expertise, some grifting, some expertise, hopefully somewhere. But yeah, great being back. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's been so much fun, and yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed listening as well. As always, we've been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL or myself at FPL Pricey. Instagram threads is WGTA.FPL or FPL Pricey on there as well. If you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it, especially today, if you could give us a follow on those socials, but also give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to it. Or, of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, please do remember to leave a like and, importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content.
Lovely. Thanks, Sam. I hope you enjoyed the pod. Great to be back. And hopefully, as you can tell, we're really raring to go for this season. We'll be back next week with a more extensive look at the pricing, but we hope we assisted you with our initial thoughts. Speak very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?